For more than a decade, the Islamist group Boko Haram had a limited strategy to create an Islamic caliphate in northern Nigeria, but now they've spread their terror campaign to neighbouring countries as well. Chad, Niger and Cameroon have responded with a military alliance, which since January has been helping the Abuja government. In March, Boko Haram joined forces with ISIL. This turned the conflict into an international one, switching on red lights across the region and accelerating a joint offensive. Euronews was on the front line, embedded with Chad's army during the liberation of a very important village in northern Nigeria. We should warn you that you may find some of the images in our report disturbing. The latest war in Africa is being fought in this desert, a triangle of the porous borders of Nigeria, Niger and Chad. A conflict between a regional coalition and one of the most barbaric and ruthless jihadist organizations in the world, the Nigerian group Boko Haram. We're making the dangerous journey to the village of Malam Fatori. Soldiers from Chad and Niger have been in control there since the end of March, but there's still some resistance from Boko Haram nearby. We're travelling to the front line with the joint military force of Niger and Chad. Swirling up dust and sand as we come into land, we're headed for an outpost. For months, it's been the base of a strike force which has been retaking Boko Haram strongholds in northern Nigeria. The soldiers you see here are tough. They're hardened in close combat and are used to the harsh environment in which they operate. The heat and sand could otherwise be a challenge. The threat these troops face from Boko Haram is very real. These soldiers are not afraid of dying, but they know the enemy is not afraid either. Boko Haram fighters think death is the quickest way to reaching paradise, something that is promised to them by their group leaders through their interpretation of Islam. Hundreds of soldiers are gathered in this area. They're supported by dozens of armoured vehicles and other military equipment. This location is around 50 metres away from Malam Fatori, the latest village that has been liberated from militant fighters. Among the massive military troops here, there's an unusual sight. 2 four-star generals, chiefs of staff from Niger and Chad, alongside each other. Some days later, we'll discover from a source close to Chad's government that it was thought the leader of Boko Haram had been killed. Abu Bakr Shakau took over the militant group in 2009 and has turned it into a killing machine. He was believed to have died during a battle in the 24 hours that followed the liberation of Malam Fatori. But it turns out that Shakau wasn't among an estimated 200 Boko Haram fighters who it's claimed lost their lives. Chad's army says 9 of its soldiers were also killed in the violence. This is the only proof we see of the battle, a haul of weapons laid out across the sand for all to see. Chad's army says these weapons were seized from the militants who were killed in the fighting. Among them are dozens of Kalashnikovs. These are weapons that have most probably been stolen or originally left by the Nigerian army. There are also high-caliber machine guns and lots of ammunition. This joint operation, particularly Chad's involvement, is starting to change things on the ground. The liberation of Malam Fatori is a major strategic victory. Boko Haram used it as a command centre, launching attacks against Niger and Chad. The Nigerian village is less than 4 kilometres from the border with Niger. The soldiers escort us to the village. With mines and IEDs still littering the area, we are warned to be extremely careful, not to leave the convoy. The journey from base camp to Malam Fatori takes just a few minutes. The silence here is worrying. The streets are deserted, the houses are empty, and there's no sign of any business going on. No workers, nobody shopping. Malam Fatori used to be home to 30,000 people. It was the venue for an important market. But after 5 months of strict Sharia law imposed by Boko Haram, it's now a shadow of its former self. The only people we see here are mainly elderly men and a few children. Very few women, and none of them young. We spot a young child though. His mother recalls what happened 72 hours earlier when the area was freed from militants.
Boko Haram left the village when they saw soldiers coming. They escaped in all directions. Before they left, they told us to leave our houses, and they burned them.
Other residents returning to the village tell us that when Boko Haram left, they took dozens of young women with them. It's claimed that when the militants seized them, the girls were stripped naked in an effort to ensure they wouldn't escape. Since then, there's apparently been no sign of them, no word on their whereabouts. Other women in the area confirm the girls were kidnapped, snatched away from them. They say male teenagers were killed too.
Boko Haram took the girls for forced marriage. They also took young children and cut the throats of male teenagers. Boko Haram had eyes and ears everywhere. They monitored every movement. When we went out in the street, when we were in our houses, they were looking at us.
The tragedy here, as with many others in Nigeria, seems like something from another era, inconceivable in the 21st century. On our way back to base camp, the only thing we hear is the wind shaking a metal fence. There are no smiling children, no neighbours chatting. Even the birds don't sing. Boko Haram has left a climate of fear. The collective paranoia is so strong that it's impossible to separate facts from rumours about massacres, murders and kidnappings. And this is the strategy of Boko Haram, to conquer through fear. The River Chari is the natural border between Chad and Cameroon. It's very easy to cross the border in a boat or to swim across. On one bank you have the village of Kusuri. On the other side you have N'Djamena, the capital of Chad. The Ungeli Bridge stretches across the river, a busy meeting point for people and trade. Thousands of people come across this crossing point every day. Until recently, the main problem facing customs officers here was smugglers. But now things are very different. Security has been boosted to prevent terrorist attacks and gun smuggling. Chad's taking the threat seriously because several of Boko Haram's attacks in Cameroon have happened just a few kilometers away from here. For Chad, the conflict is also presenting economic concerns. Militant attacks have endangered the routes it uses to trade with Nigeria and Cameroon. The border with Nigeria has been closed for more than a year. So the only remaining option for Chad, a landlocked country which imports most of what it consumes, is Cameroon. The goods arrive by road along a route which Boko Haram has been targeting for months. The route starts in the Cameroon port of Douala and ends in N'Djamena. The original route shown in black is no longer usable. The alternative seen here in white is much longer. It means more fuel, less goods, and ultimately higher prices in the markets. Can Chad's president, Idriss Déby, afford a long war against Boko Haram? Many more months of combat on the border could end up destroying the country's economy. Over the last 3 months, around 20,000 Nigerians have crossed Lake Chad looking for safe shelter. Everyone who's fled has a story to tell. The Dar es Salaam refugee camp in Chad is home to around 4,000 people. A lot of the families who have come here have come from Baga, the scene of one of Boko Haram's worst massacres. The refugees arrived with nothing. They've seen their relatives die. Some have been wounded, but the psychological wounds will take longer to heal. They escaped this kind of horror. Soldiers from Chad and Niger found this video footage on the mobile phones of Boko Haram fighters killed in Damasak when the joint force retook the area on the 17th of March. Militants recorded the mass executions in Bama in Nigeria and in another village in Cameroon. Hundreds of civilians slaughtered in cold blood. Teenagers among the killers. At Dar es Salaam camp, children are without their families. Their parents have died, or they lost them when they escaped the massacres being committed by Boko Haram on the other side of the lake. Médecins Sans Frontières is providing psychological support for those people here.
What these children have seen, you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. The Islamists have taken their childhood. It's very difficult.
These young refugees are trying to regain some sense of childhood. They're learning songs in French at a makeshift school in the camp. But while the language may be foreign to them, tragically the sound of gunfire is not. Their short lives so far already dominated by death and horror. Before sunset, a group of men gather to pray, the same prayers said by Boko Haram fighters, who use them to try and impose their way of life. The vast majority of Boko Haram's victims are Muslims. The anti-Boko Haram coalition is making real progress by expelling the Islamists from the areas they occupied in Nigeria. But will this be enough to be able to talk about the end of this sinister organization? Or is Boko Haram preparing a terrible revenge? That's the end of our special report. Thanks for watching.